I've taken a keen interest in the battle between the left and right of politics, between capitalism and socialism. It was to my surprise to discover that the battle is not a new one. The battle has been waged in places like pre-World War II Germany, in Russia in the 1920s. The battle has been ongoing in the United States for many years. History has shown a pattern of rise and fall of civilizations, and along that pattern we can see individual citizens making an effort to maintain civilizations before they collapse. In a documentary show, the author of Myra Breckenridge, Gore Vidal, was providing the camera crew with a tour of his Ravello residence in the 1960s or 70s. He said that his home overhanging the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast was a nice place to sit and watch the collapse of the West. I believe the Western civilizations is on a path and it can either rise again or fall, in much the same way that Gore Vidal noticed many years ago. But what has changed from Gore Vidal's time to our time? I don't think much has changed at all in the grand scheme. We still have the left and right divide, albeit perhaps more intense. I hesitate to say that considering how rampant assassinations were in that time, but it is my view that the division is far more widespread considering the reach of social media today. We have forces working against one another, one with a view to collectivization and one with a view towards individual responsibility and liberty. I believe my observation of Gore Vidal's comments is a reflection of the nature of the delicate balance required to maintain a free society, whether it be 50 years ago with Gore Vidal or with us today in 2019. It is the responsibility of every free-thinking person to preserve the freedom of his or her generation. For some, their responsibility is to secure it from those that might take it away. Gore Vidal took the position that he might stand back and watch the West collapse before his eyes. But I'm sure there were many more people who took it upon themselves to do what they had to do to maintain freedom. Gore Vidal's opposite, William F. Buckley, was a force in this regard, and did his bit to challenge the ideas of Gore Vidal and others that very much wanted to sit and watch the Western world collapse. Another well-known historian of the Soviet Union, particularly of Joseph Stalin, made the point that much of the challenges facing the West today are challenges of managing success. The successes of the West are the establishment of political, economic, and personal freedoms that have led to some of the most prosperous societies the world has ever seen. These societies always hang in the balance, and it is up to thoughtful people in these societies to do their part to preserve the freedoms they enjoy. Milton Friedman said the natural state of man is misery and tyranny, and that societies like the United States somehow escaped from that misery and tyranny thanks to a constitution. But there ever hangs the threat of misery and tyranny for people that are not aware and awake to the possibilities that their freedoms can be pulled out from under them in a short space of time. Seeing these people speak about the collapse of the Western world decades ago is an indication to me that they recognize the threats of their time. I see the threats of the West at the moment, and they are not so different from the time of Milton Friedman or William F. Buckley. One of the threats we have today is the threat of those in society that are so certain of their moral position that they will stop at nothing to bring about their version of a society generally organized around some notion of social justice. Take, for example, the social issue of inequality, the difference between those that are rich and those that are poor. I fear what the collectivists might do would create a far greater problem than the inequality we had in the first place. It seems to me that the West is growing tired of working, tired of everything. The trend I see is towards the governments taking care of all the people all the time. A recent appeal went out to the newly formed government in Western Australia. The appeal was to the government to create more jobs for the area this man lived in. When did society begin to see the government as the first place to go to solve all problems? No jobs in a certain area? Is it the government's responsibility to create jobs? The government certainly has an interest in people working so they might collect taxes, but individuals in a market economy should be the driving force for job creation and economic activity, not the government. The government is slow too slow to respond to the challenges in the market, and too slow to create work for people. Another tilt I see in the United States, where the Democrats are pushing hard for universal health care provided to all citizens through government influence. Once upon a time, as per Thomas Sowell, would be embarrassed if someone else had to pay for their health care. Now it seems that idea is being replaced by normalization of government dependency. I've heard a number of people say that they believe the collapse of the West is inevitable. These types make preparations to move to countries they believe are safe from the troubles of the world. I make the case every time that unless a person bows out completely, one cannot avoid the fallout from the collapse of their own civilization. When a society experiences the tumults of disturbances in the economy and social disobedience, vigilantism, they will inevitably be caught up in the troubles. Thinking one can turn a blind eye and avoid the problems will be faced with dramas they only see in Hollywood dystopian films. Think of all the effort people go through to build a bunker and to fill it with material goods preparing for what they see as the inevitable collapse of Western society. It is a sign of what I think is a retreat to the family, the last stronghold of freedom we have in society. I understand many people are sheltering their families and preserving them in faraway places, and it is ironic that the same thing must be done in our communities if we are to maintain a society that has been built up through the efforts of each generation. Imagine if all that effort put into bug-out bags and bunkers was put into restoring community ties and preserving the values of family, individual responsibility, and freedom. I don't think there is any limit to the success we would see from that effort. I don't propose any big government programs to solve all our social ills in society. In fact, I believe much of the problems we are facing in the West today stem from the responsibility governments take away from individuals and give it to the collective. I will never forget the day I heard a young man in his 20s, a bit disheveled looking, lament that the government had taken away most of the responsibility he believed was rightfully his to take on in his life. He longed for responsibility, which is a message sent by Jordan Peterson that has landed so favorably upon the ears of millions of people, many of them young men. If the West could start with anything, I would echo the encouragement from many classical liberal-minded men and women for the groundwork to begin with the individual and with the family. It all starts in the home, which is not just a home. The home is a school. The home is a church. It is a place where the values are bestowed upon people that they might go forward and do their part to maintain civilization. If civilization is a beautiful garden, for it to maintain its beauty, we must all do our bit to remove the weeds, to water the plants, prune the branches, gather the fruit, and keep out the pests. This is our charge, to be good gardeners of our own plot. Our own plot is our own mind and soul. Our plot is our own family. And when that is strong, the garden that is the civilization maintains its splendor, for all to enjoy now and for future generations.